right, and it looks like I'm live. So, hello again, everybody. Thanks again for joining me. And yeah, it's time to do the final one. So I'm gonna do the 36 Days of Type 9 today. I'm gonna finish the set that I've done. And as usual, as before, if there's any issues, let me know in the chat. I'm keeping an eye on it. If there's some background noise, it gets really warm in here. It was a hot day and the window is open. If at some point there's too many cars and you can't understand me, please let me know so I can close the window and then I'll continue. So, all right, let's get straight into it. Can't believe it's the last one. It's always sort of a fun and sad moment. I really enjoy doing this challenge, but I've got to admit this is the third year I've done it, and I'm kind of glad it's over at this point. I'm getting pretty burnt out on it, but we'll do one last one. And if you've been following me, then you might have seen that I've been using a font that has been created by my brother. It'll be available for free pretty soon on his website. Once I get a link or whatever, I'll put it on my Instagram so people can download it and have a look at it. So let's have a quick look. I'm gonna go for the rounded one, and it's sort of a decal font. It's really cool. It's not really meant to be legible, but at the same time, you can use it for stuff like decals on, I don't know, for like mechs or any kind of hard surface object or something like that. So you can do some really cool things with it, like if I just type Mantissa, for example, and you can see you can do some cool stuff, and you've got variations for the for the capital letters. And the fun thing about this is that you can sort of read it, but you sort of can't. So you can do some really fun stuff with this. But again, I'm going to stick to my 9 here. There we go. All right, I like that. I'm going to convert it to a mesh. And I'm going to do one sort of in the same vein as the ones that I've been doing the last few days, where I have this plane where the piece is cut out and there's something going on behind it. We'll start there, and if it's cool, we'll keep going. And if it's something else, yeah, we'll see. We might change it. So, solidify. There we go. So I like to usually center the solidify. That way I know the middle is on the x-axis. And you can do that by setting the offset to 0. So -1 it pushes back, and and 1 it pushes to the front. And with the offset is 0, you just make it thicker, which is really nice. I enjoy using that. All right, there we go. And create a plane. And move that up. No, just gonna scale it up like this and create a camera. Oh, looks like I forgot to turn on screencast keys, so let me do that real quick. Oh, it's on, and let me enable it here. Screencast keys. There we go. Thanks, Jorge. It is a cool font. I'm proud of my brother. He makes cool stuff too. So it's always nice when we can work on things together. I'm pretty lucky to have a brother to nerd out with about 3D things, so that's cool too. All right. There we go. Something like that. Make sure it's somewhat aligned. It feels a little bit off. There we go. And then I'm going to hide the text and just put in a Boolean. There we go. Boolean the text, and we'll do the difference. So now I just have a plain text cut out. I like to center it somewhat so I know I've got about equal sizes, sort of equal lengths around it. So if I want to zoom in or zoom out with the camera, it's quite nice, and you know, you have something to work with. One thing I'm going to do first is I'm going to subdivide this, and this is something I've been using a lot lately. Rather than hitting T and going over to the properties over here. After you've done an action in Blender, you can hit F6 and then you get the same options, which is really nice because it keeps your sort of viewport free. And I'm pointing at my screen again, but unfortunately you guys can't see that. All right, cool. So is it better to extrude or use the solidify modifier, somebody asks? Well, honestly, it doesn't matter. I prefer using the solidify because I can change the thickness afterwards. I like doing things as parametrically as possible because then that way you can always go back and tweak things, which is really nice. But for this, it really wouldn't make much of a difference. All you need to have it do is have it sort of cut through the plane. So whichever one you prefer. So I subdivided that, and now I'm gonna make sure I draw all edges so I've got a nice highly subdivided mesh. All right, cool. Now for the next thing, move this up. There we go, and scale this on the x-axis, and scale this on the z-axis, something like that. So I want it to cover whatever's behind the letter. So I'm gonna go for something like super glitchy. And I'll show you a cool trick to make some really interesting glitchy particles very quickly. So this is something I do quite a lot, and you can get infinite amounts of variation very easily. I don't know if I've done this in a video before, I might have, but it's always good to show some of this stuff. So I'm gonna start with a cube, and again, subdivide it a bunch of times. Nope. Go maybe 20 times, something like that to start it with. And am I going to edge split these or not? So if I just want these faces, so I've been doing not a lot of like modeling, but I've been doing a lot of selections and trimming meshes lately. And there's some amazing tools in Blender for making quick selections. So trying to select this could be, you know, you could paint it, but then you have to go in and it could take a while. But what I found is if you hit just one and you hit Shift G, then you have select similar. So now what I can do, for example, is if I select the ones on the same normal, I have all the ones on the same plane, which is really nice. So you can make selections very quickly. I thought that might be an interesting one to do. But what I'm going to do is actually select these edges, holding down Alt to select the loop. And I'm going to select all the outer edges real quick, and then I'm going to split them. And you'll see why in just a minute. If I don't, then I'm going to throw on a displacement modifier, and then the displacement is going to have some like weird bowing here in the corners. I want to avoid that, so I'm just going to hit. Actually, that's going to be E for edge split. And the sun's sort of in my eyes, so hopefully that won't become too much of an issue, but I guess I'm not going to complain about the nice weather. Throw on the displace, and if I had an edge split this, then these would have been connected and they would have made this weird sort of bow. And the problem when that happens is when I draw all the edges here, then I'm going to have one polygon being stretched over this edge, and you're going to get weird sort of extra edges, and I want to avoid that a little bit because I know what I'm going to do, and I'm going to keep going. You'll see why I did this in just a minute, why it becomes important. Add a new one and set it to distorted noise, and set it to cell noise. This is probably like my favorite texture in Blender. Ooh, it's meant to be 1 because it gives you this really cool sort of brick techie pattern, whatever you want to call it, very easily and quickly, and do some cool stuff. So this, I'm sure some of you are like, this really doesn't look very good at all, but I have plans. So first thing I'm going to do is remesh this. So the cool thing about the remesh is that it closes your mesh up a little bit. So even though it was like this weird mesh, now we have something more interesting. It looks a little cool. And what I'm going to do as well is make sure I set these to global. So that way when I move this around, and we're going to get into crash territory now. I've managed to crash this a bit. So I'm going to save first real quick. So 8 and 9. Look at that full folder. And I'll try and get these uploaded and, well, cleaned up first and uploaded as quickly as possible so you can pick through them yourselves. They'll be on the Blender cloud as the previous years. So All right, cool. So now we've got that done. We've still got kind of a crazy mesh. I like to use a decimate modifier after this. And what you're going to get from this is if you set it to planar, now all of a sudden these extra grid edges are disappearing and we get just sort of the edges of the object. But as I wanted to show you before, if I move this one now, because this is set to global up here, so G and X, you can see I get different ones every single time. So I can set up my entire stack on just one first, and then use that one and just copy it over a bunch of times and then group them together, and I have a nice set of different particles that I can use in the particle system. So one more thing I want to do is maybe wireframe this. That looks pretty cool, but it seems a little bit too complex still. So maybe something like this, or I'm not sure. Maybe something else first. I'm going to turn these two off. Actually, I'm going to remove these because I can always add them again later. And I want to take out some more pieces from this shape. So I'm going to use the trick from the quick tip, and I'm going to use a texture to drive the mask of the polygons. So let's call this one mask. So if I'm going a little quick on this one, then be sure to check out the rest of the channel if you haven't checked it out. There's a quick tip on how to use textures to mask stuff, influence modifiers, and do all kinds of cool stuff with modifiers and textures. So I would recommend checking that out if you're interested in this technique. So let's see. So we have that set up, and what else am I doing? All right, so we've got our texture coming into our mask, and I'll close these up for a second. So what do I want to do? I want to set up this texture as well, and this is set to a distorted noise because it's just grabbing it. And maybe I'll just do the same thing, but I'll make it a little bit smaller. So something like this, and it's not really doing anything, but if we look at the, I don't know if we'll be able to see it. I actually never checked this. Is it vertex? No, not vertex paint. Weight paint. Oh, there we go. So now you can actually see that texture here being visualized. If I open and make it larger and smaller, you'll see exactly what I mean. The vertex group is being populated by the darker and lighter parts of the texture. So that's really nice, and that allows us to, for example, grab this mask and then add that mask vertex group, and there we go. Now we're dynamically grabbing these things as well. And same deal, if I set this to global, then if I move this around, save again first, then we have the shape and the texture dynamically changing, which allows us to make infinite variations extremely quickly. So let's see, this looks pretty cool. I'm going to do the little decimate trick because I want to make sure I only have the edges. And then again, I'm going to add a wireframe. And there we go. And the nice thing is, because this is all in the modifier stack, I can always go back and change stuff. I can either keep the original, maybe I'll do that. That might be an interesting effect. And turning stuff quickly on and off. Even thickness, I usually turn it off, even though it sounds like a good thing to use. The problem is if you get complex meshes, sometimes it completely freaks out and there's polygons everywhere and it goes completely crazy. So let me answer some questions real quick. New Blender and Linux themes. Yeah, if you haven't joined in a while, I think this Blender theme is one that I've been working on. It's still not finished, but I really like this one for when it gets darker and I'm working at night. And the Linux theme I've been using for a while. I don't know, it's alright. It's about the same as it was before. So, but yeah, I think the Linux theme is on my GitHub. I don't know if the Blender theme is already, because I know some windows aren't working yet. So, greetings from Germany. Hey Olf, thanks for joining again. Hi Angelo, thanks for joining as well, and Felipe. All right, cool. I'm gonna keep going. So I was talking about this. Yeah, so the wireframe. Then, so the even thickness sometimes makes things a little crazy. Relative thickness is a really cool effect because it will make the wireframes, I'm just going to turn on replace original, thicker in places where the edges are longer, so you can do some cool effects with that. And if you want some free craziness, if you throw a subdivision modifier on this, for example, you get super nice sort of organic looking shapes and things. But that's not really what I'm going for, but it's just a quick trick. And again, you can mess with the thickness. I'm not going to use relative thickness. I think we'll be okay for now. I'm just going to try this. And boundary, let's see, basically closes it up if this is an edge. So you can see how the mesh is sort of not completely closed. Hitting boundary really throws that up there. So, and then replace original whether you want the original mesh to show or not. So I've already set up this material offset because I know I want a different material on the inside of these than I want for the lines. So setting that to 1 basically means the base material is going to be used for the original polygons and a second material will be used for the edges. We'll get into that in just a bit. Do I like this shape? It's okay. I'm going to group this first. And I'm going to call this instance. Call it tech, and I'm going to call this one tech.000. That way, when I now copy these over, so I'm going to duplicate them, the x-axis. There we go. It's done, and dang it, I hit it too quickly. So duplicate it again, X, there we go, and then hit Shift R to do the same thing. And I'm just going to do like 10. And as you can see, just because I've set this all up on global coordinates, now we get all these random ones that we can use and do some really fun things with. So this is really nice to get like insane detail very quickly. And I can always go back, delete all of these, change the first one, and then duplicate them again. It's usually quicker than doing all the different ones. And they're all still linked to the same things, to the same textures. So if I want larger gaps, I can change it. I can even change it to 5, and you'll see how that affects it. And you can do some crazy things with it. So this is about 1.5. And another cool trick, which if you don't know this, is very nice. I don't know if it'll work with all these modifiers, but seeing that they're the same, it usually does. But if you wanna edit like a value or whatever of all of these objects at the same time, if you hold down the Alt key, you'll actually see it'll change of all the ones that are selected. So I know this works for the modifiers because they've all got exactly the same modifier stack, but as I was saying earlier, you'll get crashes, so that can be kind of annoying. You've got to watch out with all of them linked together. I found that can get a little funky sometimes. So let's get the autosave going. And is there a 9 in here? No. Is there a 9 in here? No. 2002. Looks like I might have lost some work there. It's not in here. Okay. Try it again real quick. Should be in there, but it's not, unfortunately. That's too bad. Not a big deal. This is why I save stuff. So again, let's see. Where was I? I had not grouped these yet, so. And this still needed the wireframe. Set it to boundary, and I forgot to put on the decimate. Planar 5 is fine. And I'm not going to replace the original and change the material offset. There we go. Alright, so that's that set up again. And we'll group this and call it group. Call it tech. Save again. The good news is though, I found that once these are done, generally what I'll do is sometimes I'll collapse them all down, so apply all the modifiers just to make sure that they don't bug out. But usually once you're done and you're not really moving them or doing anything with them and just scattering them on the particle system, it should be okay. But again, we'll see. Alright, so I've got this one already set up for my particle system. And I want to distribute these over a volume. And I want to set these up that they're not actually moving, but that they're just still. So turning off the physics really helps with that. And that way, even if I were to move it around, it's not going to change. It's just sticking to it. So I'm going to grab the group that I just created, and let's see if we up the size. It's going to be overly complicated, I think. And is there anything else I need to do? Turn off the emitter. Let's see what happens when I hit render. So that's way too many of them. Let's turn that down a little bit. Maybe even a little bit more. Alright, so that looks pretty cool. And just move this back so that they're not sticking through the mesh. So with these last few ones, what I've really liked is that you get the feeling that you're sort of glimpsing a world or like a texture behind it. And I don't know, I just like the way that looks. So let's see. What else can we do? This still might be a little bit much. Oop. Quite a lot of them. Maybe if we turn up the random size, because we want to get some small detail in there as well. That looks pretty cool. Maybe turn down the overall size a little bit. There we go. Now we get sort of that tech looking super, I don't know what to call it, super over the top detailed stuff. Now if you're going to do this properly, and by properly I mean this looks okay, don't get me wrong, but if you want to get into this type of style, there's definitely a lot of science to it. I like to kind of joke around and just go for the full-on over the top detail, but yeah, if you're going to do this type of thing, like if you're going to make a spaceship or whatever, there's definitely a bit more of a science to it than just doing it this way. But because we're just doing letters, we can get away with it, which is cool. Just setting up the camera a little bit. Let's go for the big laugh and set this one to 420 as before. But that way I can actually see what's happening a little bit better. So just want to get the ratio kind of right. It's not really that big a deal, but I don't know, it has to feel like it's in the middle. And you might be tempted to sort of align this out and make sure this looks like it's in the middle. But I've had a couple of letters and numbers where you might have to shift it just a little bit to the left or to the right or up or down, just to make it feel like it's in the middle. So there we go. Got that set up, and we're already down to shading. That would be quick. Maybe we are. Let's see what we can do. Start adding some fun stuff to this. So before I get into it, I want to make sure that all of my shaders are linked. So I'm going to add 2 slots. I'm going to add the base material and the wire material, and I'm just going to hit Control L. You can see it by the colors of the objects, and hit materials, so that way it links all the materials with the one I've got selected. So now I've got all of them done, and I usually have this set to visible layers, but I'll switch to current scene when I'm working with particles, and then that way I don't even have to see the particle, and I can still edit the materials and get a nice real-time preview. So that's always good. I'm all about the real-time preview. Cool. All right, let's get into it. See, anybody say anything? No lost work? Yeah, I know. Sometimes things crash, but that's the way it is. Shading Shenanigans needs to be a trilogy. A lot of those Weird Shit episodes should have multiple parts, and that's the reason I'm streaming. I have a lot of work right now, and I don't always have the time to make tutorials, but I am planning on doing more. Don't ask me when. It really depends on when I have time, and right now I've got a lot of work. But yeah. So yeah, waiting for the next Weird Shit Says the Next Person. I'm gonna do a big rendering one, but at this point I might even wait until there's a beta for 2.8, so I can talk about Eevee and cycles a little bit more, because there's a lot of cool stuff that's being put in there now. I don't want to wait until it's a little bit more final before I start explaining it. And a big shout out to you as well. Thanks for joining. All right. So let's start with the base material. So this is just the polygons here. And I have this shader that I use for holograms that I really like, that I've created myself. And it's basically sort of an optimized shader. So what do I mean by that? This might seem really, really complex, but it's really not that bad. I think I might have explained this one a little bit before, but the reason I like using this one instead of just straight up emission is because I've got it set up where I can turn the back-facing polygons on and off, which is really nice. And I can turn on and off the lighting contribution of the shader. And lighting stuff with an emission shader gives a lot of noise, so that's why I'm implemented that. I've got strength and opacity, and I can add in a mask and things as well, so I might do that in just a little bit. But I'm going to turn on Fresnel, because Fresnel gives you this crazy amount of detail very quickly and easily. And what I'm going to do as well is turn off the world. So now we've got just this insane over-the-top amount of detail, so we might have to bring that down again a little bit. Because that's the biggest issue with Instagram, is that you get, even though this has a lot of detail and you might see it really well on a computer screen, to translate that to a phone is kind of a pain in the butt, and it won't work all that well. So let's see. This still might be too much, but maybe turn down the random size and turn the regular size up a little bit. And it's just a big mess. And just hit the seed a couple of times until I get one that I like. So let's see. I want one that has a lot of sort of detailed distribution. So it has parts like this one. I'll go back a little bit. This one is a pretty good one, but I'm not sure if I really like those dark spots. So I sometimes sit here hitting seed for like 10 minutes until I get the perfect one. And then sometimes the particles wig out and you hit like back to the first frame and they do something completely different. There we go. I like this one. This one's interesting. Let's see what happens when I bring down the number. It completely changes everything, unfortunately, but that's okay. You can build it like this as well. Cool. So this is nice. It has a lot of different sort of detail in it, and we haven't even gotten to the compositing yet. Or the second shader. So I'm going to leave that one white for now and change it in just a little bit. So again, same shader because I want more holograms, because I'm all about the holograms. There we go. Change the color up, maybe something greenish, I don't know, blue. Get some of that Tron blue. I'm looking at my Tron Legacy poster on the wall. There we go. And as you can see, just messing with the Fresnel, because I'm adding Fresnel to these wires, you get these really intricate looking effects for free, which is awesome. So there we go. Bring that just up a bit, and then maybe bring the opacity up. It's a little over the top, I think, so mess with the Fresnel bias. All right, nice. Now, what are we going to do with the base? Because it's cool, but it's sort of shining through. And let's see if I can add a texture to that. So I have a bunch of custom textures that I've been using that I've created. So these are procedurals, but they do require texture coordinates. But because these are particles, the problem is now they're all going to have sort of the same texture coordinates, and I want to change that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the world position. So if I grab the geometry here and just hit position here, this doesn't really make a lot of sense, but basically what this position can be used for is to have UV coordinates that are based in the world. So that means if we're going to have like 4 cubes next to each other, and I use the position over here as the vector for my UVs, then the texture is going to run all along those cubes in world space, which is really nice because this way, even though I have all these instant objects, I can still get different textures placed on them because I'm using the world position. Now, one thing I'm going to have to do is flip this because vector mapping, because it's actually pointing top down, and this grid thing is made out of a bunch of brick textures that are like affecting each other and all that. And unfortunately the brick texture is only 2D, So if I rotate this, I think 90 degrees, there we go. And now you can see it being projected. The only issue is that, as you might notice, the texture is now stretched in 2D along the y-axis, but that's okay. It's not really that big a deal. If I change this in size, then it won't be, you won't really see the difference. So there we go. Change the color bias a little bit. And then if I plug this into the opacity mask, now all of a sudden I'm affecting this with the grid. So you'll see it change. There we go. You can change the color bias, have a little bit darker stuff in there, and maybe change the color as well. Looks like I'm gonna have to put in just a little bit more. And I think I have too many wires. So, so somebody asks, will I be uploading blend files? Yes, they'll be on the Blender cloud as the previous years once I clean them up. So it should be a little bit after the 36 days of type finish. So what do I want to do? I want to go back to my tech layer and actually change all those ones. So again, I'm going to change them together, and I'm going to save first so we don't lose any work this time. And then holding down Alt, I'm going to bring down the octree depth. And that way we have slightly less stuff, but it will be less visually cluttered, I think. See, there we go. Now we get a more interesting pattern. And again, it's just all a case of messing around with it. There we go. And I don't know, it's okay, but I'm not convinced. Maybe I should ease up on the holograms. Let's try something else. What happens if I just throw in a regular principled shader? So I have no lights in my scene right now, which is why it's going to look weird. But I'm just going to replace these with a principled shader. And now I'm going to add an analyte. So let's go back to the first layer over here. And I've been doing a lot of fun stuff with these sun lamps. So if you add a sun without any whatchamacallit, extra environment or sky texture, then all of a sudden you get this really nice stark contrast. So let's see if I can go in here so I can see what's going on. So all of a sudden all this detail really pops because you've got this really nice contrasty light coming up. And just doing something like this, for example, gives you a really cool kind of view. So looks like I can get back to the tech layer again, and maybe, oh, there we go, and maybe up the detail again saving before I do 5. Let's see if we go, that was too much. There we go, and this is why we save. Nice, did it this time. I think it was because I was still rendering, that might have been it. Now it takes a while to get started, so there we go. Look at that, now we get all this crazy detail and we can start having fun with it. So those shaders that we did earlier weren't lost. We can still mess with them and try some things out. Alright, let's see. What can we do? Let's up the light a little bit first. Yeah, 5. Interesting. Happens when we change it. No, that's not really it. I want to add in details on the shaders themselves. So let's see if we mess with these colors. It's interesting, but I'm not really convinced. I think we need more particles. Let's play with the seed a little bit. Now turn off the plane for just a second so we can see what's actually happening. So this is why I want to get back to not doing letters, so I can start rendering this kind of stuff in all its glory. Something tells me I want even more detail. I'm going to go back to that layer and see if I can change it. Might crash again, but hey, that's life, I guess. Save one last time. Don't crash. All right, cool. So this kind of thing I really like. These sort of intricate looking, stepping, blocky things. Let's change the wire down to something a little bit smaller. Ooh, and I didn't use Alt, so let's undo that and hope it doesn't crash. Again, we're in like super crash territory here. All right. And as you can see, there's also some back faces here. I'm gonna fix that just by hitting double-sided. And now they're all front faces from whatever side you're looking at them, which is really nice. And again, I forgot to hit the Alt button, so again, save, and do it again. Okay, now that's good to go. Come on. Rendering's getting a little slow, but you can't really blame it because of the poly count. I just hope I'm not... Is it rendering? Yeah, it should start. Let's have a look at my RAM usage. So that's not too bad. So I'm only using 8 gigs, which is nice because Blender's actually quite good at instancing. It's just weird that it won't render. Everything's stuck. All right, let's see if I can answer some questions. So, how long have I been using Blender to do this? Well, actually, I've only been using Blender for about 3 years, but I used other stuff before that. So a lot of the tricks that I do with modifiers come from the fact that I used to use 3ds Max. And there's similar modifiers in 3ds Max that also use sort of a modifier system. So a lot of the tricks that I learned in Max, I use in Blender as well, which is really nice. So we have too many particles because it's getting a little slow. I don't like that. So I'm going to turn it down, but what I'm going to do is bring this back face in just a little bit. So they're bunched a little closer together, and then we're going to hit the seed so we get a nice even looking distribution. Maybe set this to random. Ooh, I like the way that's looking. Again, hit render, so shader magic happening. Well, most of them haven't been too complex. Yeah, the hologram ones, yes, but the new ones aren't really that complex yet. Happy stuff every moment. Thank you, Jorge. Have I tried the Matalog Blender add-on? No, I haven't even heard of it. So let's see. If I can grab... Let's see if I can find it. I take it that it might be something to do with materials. A quick look. Matalog. Oh, nice. That's funny. I literally had an idea to do something like that last night. That's awesome. Cool. All right. Well, thank you for the tip for sure. I'll definitely be looking into this. That's great. Just having all your materials in there. Nice. Nice. Pro tip. All right. Look at that. That's looking pretty glorious. Let's turn on plane on again. And we can't use it because the surface area is too small. Not too bad. We'll keep hitting the seed until the whole thing is populated. I'm gonna have to up the amount just a little bit, but I want to keep it as lightweight as possible. If that's even, you know, still the word to use for this kind of scene. That one might be pretty good, I think. Let's see. And again, somebody says, yo, your streams are dope. Thank you very much. You're dope for being here. Have I ever used OpenCV with these graphics? I have to admit I don't know what OpenCV is. So again, open up Firefox real quick. Okay, so it looks like it's a little bit similar to something like processing, but for graphics mainly. Oh man. Well, the thing is, I'm a really terrible programmer, so I kind of know how programming works, and I wrote a few scripts for 3ds Max back in the day, and I've been trying to write a Blender add-on, but I'm not very good at it. So I think I'm gonna have to get a little bit better at Python before I try and do something like this, but it seems like it's pretty cool. Is there more? Oh, it's machine learning. Cool. So yeah, somebody was talking about that in the last stream. I definitely want to try and do some machine learning stuff with my art. It's awesome. My sun lamp seems bright at low values. Do I use Filmic Blender ever? Yes, I always use Filmic Blender. Well, almost always. My default is set to Filmic and high contrast. So yeah, that's it. I use it quite a lot. I'll switch between other stuff every now and again, but for the most part I use Filmic because it's just got a great response curve when it comes to colors. So but I'm using a sun lamp, which by default is quite bright, so that might be it. OpenCV for a Raspberry Pi camera. Ooh, nice. That sounds interesting. All right. Do I have any cool free add-on recommendations for procedural geometry generation? No, I don't actually. I just do everything with modifiers. I'm kind of boring, so. I'm going to keep on shading for a bit and then I'll answer some more questions, otherwise it might get a little boring. So, let's see, which one are we changing now? So we've got the base here. Let's see if we can try some other shaders. So there's another group I use a lot, which is architectural glass, and this is actually in the Blender documentation. So if you want glass that doesn't throw shadows and doesn't have a lot of fireflies, this is mainly used for glass when you're doing architectural visualizations, which means you basically just want the sun to shine through. You don't really want anything else but the reflections and the refractions. And setting this up like this actually works really, really well. So yeah, it's good stuff. But what it means is that you get super fast glass looking stuff without actually that much of a performance hit. And I'm just wondering what it does, if this actually has any effect on the scene at all. Doesn't look like it. Maybe if I up roughness a little bit. There we go. That's getting interesting. Don't know if that's going to be any good for Instagram, but hey. I'll turn off the plane again a little bit because we've got a nice thing here. Just see what we're doing. So that's a cool look. Let's see what happens when you change the colors. And a little bit more contrast into it. So now you can see the deeper it goes, the more the colors are mixing. And this looks really interesting, actually. I really like that. Oh, I was in the camera view already. Let me turn on my plane again. Let's see. This is blocking quite a bit of light. What else could I do? So again, this is one of the reasons I really enjoy this challenge, is because you're dealing with a letter, you kind of know what you have to do. So all of these, if you get started on them, all of them, you know, can be either a modeling exercise or a sculpting or shading or whatever exercise, and that's a lot of fun to do. I really, really like that. Let's see if I just bring the saturation down a little bit. There we go. I've got to find a way to get some depth in here, but I've got a cool trick for that. What I want to do though is actually get some extra sort of lit up stuff, so that way we have emission going on as well as refraction, and that always adds up to some really cool, interesting effects. So let's add in a mix shader. And I'm going to grab this hologram shader that I created before. I'm going to preview it first and see if this is any good. And actually, I might not do this on here, but I might just do this on the wireframe, so that way we can get wires that have a little bit of extra lighting here and there. So shader, mix shader, and I should really get a little bit faster with the node wrangler, because you can do all of this with holding down shortcuts, and I keep forgetting. And then I'm going to add in that. Actually, I'm going to copy that over, So we had this set up already. Copy that and paste it here. There we go. So I don't have to set it up again. Actually, we don't need that one. Pipe it into here. And now we'll get, every now and again, we'll get like a highlight on the, nope, not in color, but in opacity. Nope, not in opacity, but in the mix shader. What am I doing? There we go. And now every now and again, we'll get highlight within those. And this is turning out to be something really funky and weird, but that's cool. Wow, that looks awesome. Let's preview this and see what's going on here. So it's definitely too much. So I'm going to change the color bias down. Something like that, maybe. So now only some of them have that effect. And now it's getting slow. But then again, we're dealing with so many refractions and we're adding emission into the mix. That's just asking for trouble. But hey, that's what we're all about. No compromises. Maybe bring down the color bias a little bit more. There we go. And it's an interesting set of colors. I'm gonna see what happens when I mess with the hue a bit. Man, it is slow. Yellow doesn't really do anything. Red is going to be too much of the same, I think. Yeah, it was pretty good where we had it. Let's see if we can do some other colors. Ooh, I like that. That's an interesting mix of colors. And that's a little too much, maybe. They get too close to one another. Let's try somewhere between those two. Let's really crank up the value. There we go. All right, I'm gonna hit the render button real quick and then answer some questions so we can have a look at a slightly higher sampled render. So, oh yeah, so cool free add-on recommendations. I said no, but actually the tissue add-on, which is included in Blender, is one you should have a look at because it allows you to basically use a mesh and then for each polygon actually have another mesh on top of that polygon, so you can get these really super crazy over the top, like detailed, interesting things. So I could use less particles by weight painting them where I want them. Yeah, that's true. I could, but I'm lazy, so I just like to hit the C button. Somebody asked, what do you think about animation nodes? I get this question every time. I've used it a number of times at this point, and I do like it. I just need to spend a little bit more time on it. Right now I still get it to crash a lot, but it's more me than anything else because I don't really know what I'm doing. So I'm messing around a little bit too much, and it's not that great. So I've messed with it, but I really just need to invest the time. But it is an amazing add-on, and having the developer at the code quest right now is pretty interesting. That orange glass looks fantastic. Thank you very much. And if you use a gradient there, it would probably look great as well. Yeah, we can add some stuff to the glass. It's not, obviously we're not there yet. Just make the plane not cast shadows. That's a very good idea. I might just do that. That work, the easiest way would be the camera ray node. There's a quicker way even in the object settings that I like to use. If it's slow on your PC, I can't even imagine how slow it would be on my poor 1070. Yeah, this is, but like we're up there with the annoying shaders, like having rough glass as sort of your main shader, and then the amount of refractions that are going on is just killing it completely. I mean, this would be hard for any renderer really on any computer, so let's find a way to optimize that a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go back. So it was looking all right. First I'm gonna turn the shadows off here, and I'm gonna set it to rendered so we can see what's happening. Add dispersion to the glass. That would be just a nightmare to render, I think. And I don't know if it'll be a a added value, because dispersion tends to work really great when you have single objects that don't have too much detail. If you have a lot of detail already, then adding dispersion to that makes it almost too detailed, up to a point where you can no longer see the details. I know that sounds a little weird, but I don't think for this instance it might be a good idea. But once you download the file after I upload them, it's up to you guys to check them out. Now we've got to ask ourselves a hard question. Is the glass really worth it? So I bring down the roughness. Does that help? And does it change the look a lot? Still incredibly slow. I kind of like this as well, to be honest. And it renders a whole lot faster. I feel like the detail maybe gets a little bit lost in the glass shader. What if we just take away the take it away altogether? Although this is really nice. That looks awesome. Let me just add a little bit of roughness. Just bring some of that detail back. No, it's just a matter of adding roughness until I'm happy with it. And I might even change the seed of the particles again. Don't know if I want to do that while I'm rendering, but we'll give it a shot. That's a lot faster than I would have expected. Seems like a pretty good distribution. Let's turn off the cycle settings shadow. And now we're getting full lighting from the sun. Then again, it might be interesting just to turn that off really quick and see what happens. We lose the detail in the glass, so it is needed. Alright, I'm going to work on the plane just a little bit now, because I want something that's slightly more interesting than this. And just so I can get things speeded up a little bit, I'm going to apply the, I'm going to convert this to a mesh so I can apply the Boolean, because otherwise it's going to slow everything down. It's going to be a pain in the butt. Solidify. Maybe push this one out. Let's have a look. And let's see if we can completely kill it and then add in some glass on that one as well. Maybe see if we can add a glass pane. But then maybe the effect won't be great. We'll see. We'll see. We'll just wait for it to render. Time for some more questions. So, also using your CPU to render, try changing tile size to 16 by 16. Yeah, I'm not using the CPU as well. I'm just using using GPUs at the moment, mainly because I'm also streaming and I don't want to tax the CPU thread that's streaming. Otherwise, it might just completely go to crap. I don't want to avoid that. So I can remove both versions. Okay, so somebody's still talking about the tissue add-on. That's fine. That's already quite interesting. Let's go for broke and add in. I'm just gonna add in the arch glass. Ooh, this is quite painful. Don't know if it's really worth it. Let's let it cook a little bit. So Luca, you're asking me how long I've been using Blender. I answered that before. I don't know, you might have missed that. So I've been using Blender 3 years-ish, but I've been a 3D artist for 8 or 9 at this point. And I used to dabble with Cinema 4D years and years and years ago, even before that. But like hardcore into 3D, probably 8 or 9 years at this point. Like really, that's my main thing. So that's nice, but I don't know if it's really worth the render time. We might be able to fake that with something else, with a translucent shader. It's just as slow. It's just the particles that are really slow. But hey, that's the price we pay for rendering cool stuff, I guess. All right, so I'm gonna focus on the particles for a little bit longer. I'm gonna throw these two out, and I'm just gonna put in a principled shader, not a volume, but a regular one. I honestly kind of like the look of the white surface here. It really does work quite well. I don't know if adding color to it would really, doesn't really add to it. No, just the white is fine. All right, so let's add a little bit of a fall off onto these. And just put in a cube. And there's probably easier ways to do this, but this is the way I do it because I like the way it looks. Come on. There we go. Let's add a plane, and then that got flipped for some reason. Flip to normals. Or add a box rather, and then just add a single, or add a transparent shader first, because I don't want the surface, but I want to use the volume for something. Transparent, there we go. And to the volume, I'm going to add a volume absorption. So what that's going to do is it's actually going to fade out the ones that are a bit further away, because the volume is absorbing the light. So that way you get slightly more separation, and as you can see, it adds in just that little bit more detail. So we're getting like almost an old school sci-fi vibe, which is nice. Let's see what happens. Just let it cook for a little bit. So that's cool. We could even go further than that and maybe even color this, so that way you'll get like a colored fall off. But I don't know if it's that worth it. So now we're adding in green, and you can see it's sort of changing color a little bit. Adding in the blue. Adding in the blue really accentuates the extra stuff going on here, so we'll see. But that's becoming a really, really nice pattern. I really like that. Maybe a bit more blue like this. Somewhere in between. Just a touch brighter. There we go. So that's nice, but it doesn't feel very 3D at the moment. Let's add in a camera. Not a camera, but an empty. And I'm going to call this focus, and I'm going to call this one about 70 millimeters. And that way we can use it for the focal point for the camera. So there we go. And I'll move it in here. So I really like the look when the letter, the shape of the letter itself isn't actually in focus, but the pattern behind it. That gives it a very interesting effect, and I've abused it a few times now. But yeah, that's fun. Setting the size up a little bit. And it's always good to overdo this to see, you know, how far you can go. Like, this is cool, but it's too much. Maybe just a little bit. Something like that's all right. It's not bad. I wonder what happens when I black that one out. That looks pretty nice. Maybe just give it a little bit of gray so we have something to work with. Not too light. And dial down the depth of field just a little bit. So that's looking interesting. Alright, I'm gonna up the samples a little bit. Hopefully we won't have to wait too long. Let's set it to 420 just for shits and giggles. So is there any more questions? What's the difference between using volume absorption and the mist pass? Well, volume absorption is basically in camera, if you want to call it that, and the mist pass is a compositing effect. I could probably use the mist pass to do something similar. Really depends. I've gotten a little obsessed with doing everything sort of in camera in the scene itself. But you know, if you're on a slower machine, then I think the mist pass would definitely be a better option. So, good lord, this is taking forever. Really need to get some new glasses. Gonna have to go in and look closer every time. Oh, it's getting warm in here. So Michael says, hey Mitch, really sick stuff. Thank you very much. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Am I using Blender for professional and commercial stuff as well? Yes, I make my living as a freelancer using Blender. So I work for a couple of local studios here in Antwerp, where I'm from, and I have a bunch of clients from all over the world, and yeah, you know, DJs, mostly like musicians and stuff that ask me for things. I do a lot of VJ visuals. I do a lot of artwork for music, so that means album covers, things like that. But yeah, I use Blender every day, and that's my job. I work from home, blendering away. So it's kind of a dream situation for me at the moment. I'm gonna hold on to that as long as I can. Although I'll admit, there's some stuff to working in a studio as well that you can't ignore. Working in a studio is a lot of fun because you get to hang out with other people as well. So that's always a plus. So yeah. All right, this is looking pretty cool. Come on, render. Have a drink of water in the meantime. And one more thing about working from home as well is, although I really enjoy being here, recently had about three-ish months where I was really busy, where I got very little of a break, and after a while, you know, you get a bit of cabin fever. So you do need to go outside and make sure that you know, you're still sort of being social and doing stuff, because it's very easy to just sit here and get frustrated and keep sitting here. So all right, we can get to compositing, which is arguably the best part because of all the hard work is done. I might change this up a little bit more. So let's see. So first thing I'm going to do is add some glow, because glows are awesome. Mix, add. There we go. So by setting this to 1, I'm getting just the glow. I'll set this to fog glow and bring down the threshold maybe a little bit, or just boost the colors up. So I'm going to add in RGB curves and just lighten this whole thing up. That's too much. Something like this. Bring down the threshold. So good glow going on. And then maybe bring down the factor a little bit. Once you set this to high, it gets so slow, but on medium, it really tends to thrash your edges. I think the depth of field is actually not working in our favor. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to change a couple of things. All right, so this plane, I don't want to solidify this, but I do want to add a subsurf. And I want to add an adaptive subsurf because I'm going to do some displacement. Now the edges are a little wonky here, and for the most part, I don't really care. So if it gives me problems, I'll fix it, but I'm not going to worry about it too much. So I'm gonna have to render again, aren't I? It's gonna take a while. But there's some questions. So is it possible for me to show some of my professional work? A lot of the stuff that I've done lately, I haven't gotten clearance for, so I would say no, but maybe I can show one that I did a while back. No, clients, hopefully this isn't too slow. So this is actually this is on Instagram as well, so you might have seen this, but I did a couple of VJ loops for an American DJ who lives in China. They're a lot of fun. Come on. Yeah, this is pulling from my network drive, so it's taking a while to start up. Come on, come on, come on. Yes, no, maybe. There we go. So I did a couple of these. And this was not long after I created all the loops that are on my Instagram page, so they're pretty cool. It's always fun when you get to mess around with people's logos and stuff and integrate them. Let's see, this is number 2 that I did. So these are really, really fun. They're good projects. So a lot of the stuff that I do, like even commercially, you'll see is, you know, very much a similar style. So this one was okay too. I did one last one, which I was really proud of. This one was really nice as well. All glitchy and crazy. So that's an example of the type of things that I do for clients. There's a lot more there, but like I said, a lot of the times when you're doing professional work, you have to get clearance first before you can show it somewhere. And that's the only one that I know off the top of my head that I'm allowed to show. So let's see. I'm gonna go add a couple of things here and there. So what do I want to do? Okay, so I want to add, this plane is a little bit boring. I want to add some streaks and lines, and I found sort of an interesting way of doing this. And again, it's using this grid shader that I made. And what we're going to do is set this to object. And actually, I shouldn't have thrown that mapping node away because it's going to be in the wrong thing. So vector mapping, I'm probably going to have to turn this. There we go. Pull this back up a little bit and a little bit of grid. So now we get a nice sort of distorted looking, distorted grid pattern. See if I can add in something else. Scribble maybe? No. Let's see if we add in some grid displace. Okay, that's all right, but what I want to do now is add in displacement. So you might notice I'm using the Blender daily builds up here. So the displacement has changed in cycles, so that's something to note if you're using the daily builds or 2.8. This is now a vector output, so that means there's not just displacement, but also vector displacement. And best thing ever, and I'm just gonna preview this like this first so we don't get into it. If I connect these up and I plug it in, no more waiting for the displacement to show up. It just does it instantly, which is really awesome. So you can get real-time visualization of the displacement. So there's a bunch of developers to thank for that. So as you can see, what I'm doing now is I'm creating these shapes, and the reason I'm doing it this way is it can catch the sunlight a little bit, which is really nice. Now, again, I'm going to mess around with the camera here because I don't feel like depth of field is adding. And let's see. This is interesting, but is it good enough? Bring the scale down a little bit more. I just want them to like barely catch the light. It'll probably take forever now to load in those particles. Questions? Did you work in some studio outside of your city, country? No, I've actually never worked in a studio outside of the country. I've worked with studios outside of the country as a freelancer from home, but I've never physically worked at them. But I have physically worked in studios here in Belgium, where I'm from, mostly in Antwerp. So somebody asked to know denoising feature. I try to avoid denoising at all costs, and the reason for that is especially when you're trying to do like very high detail stuff, it just completely wipes out the detail. And you can mess with the settings a little bit, but I find that it doesn't quite retain the amount of detail that I would like it to. So I usually crank up the samples a little bit, and then like I do a lot of rendering when I go to bed, for example. So I'll just hit F12 and then go to bed. So nice to hear me as well. All right, cool. Good to know that there's other people out there making money with Blender. Do you experience some shift in studios? Are they using Blender more often? Or are they more open to Blender than maybe once was? It really depends. If they're already using a 3D application, then most of the time they've heard of Blender, but they're not that interested. Generally, when a studio does 3D, they have a set pipeline, and introducing new applications to that is a major pain in the butt. So they'll be a little bit wary of it. In studios where they don't really have a 3D person, where I'm sort of the 3D person and I freelance for them, they're very receptive to it. Mainly because I can show them what I do, and that usually gets people interested. And because it's free and it runs on everything, doesn't matter if they've got Macs or PCs, they can immediately start using it. And I've had it before where I do 3D work for the studio, and then a few people or even one person is interested and they ask for classes. So then I'll be teaching at the studio, which is really nice as well. And the more love we can spread for Blender, the better. So there's definitely, I think there's a lot of artists now in the last couple of years that have really shown that Blender is up to the task of creating some seriously cool stuff. And I think there's definitely been a bit of a shift. Although the Blender effect, as I like to call it, is still very much a thing, where if you show people something, if I tell people I use Blender, they're usually not interested in seeing what I do. And then, that's it. And the other way around, if I show them my work first, and then they always ask me like, oh, do you use Maya or Cinema 4D or whatever, and I say Blender, they go, wow, seriously? You can do that in Blender? So there's a funny sort of relationship going on in the industry with Blender, which is interesting. So, but I think, it's so versatile, and just some of the parts of Blender are so good. Like the modeler is absolutely amazing. And I mean, I'm not that much of a modeler even to begin with. So, why don't I use Blender's search function when adding nodes? I'm just so used to hitting Shift A. I don't know. I like having my hand on the mouse and keyboard at the same time. I think that might be something to do with it. So yeah, node. Somebody said something about the node wrangler. Say I'm using that to preview the nodes. All right, I'm gonna keep going a little bit first and then answer a few more questions because I want to get this finished, because I'm pretty much done at this point with this project. Let's change the roughness. So what I'm going to do here is actually use that sunlight to introduce just a little bit of lines in it. So this is a great way of looking at geometry from a different light and show you that lighting is incredibly important. If you want to get these streaky, glitchy effects, rather than doing it in the compositor, you can actually use the available light in your scene to do something like this. So that's nice because you get to preview it real time. Let's scale a little bit, maybe bring it down just another little bit. Although I like the position of those lines. There we go. That looks pretty cool. And now we've got something that we can start messing with in the compositor. I might bring up the exposure here. All right, and maybe even bring down the black here and specular, because I really just want the highlights. So maybe the roughness as well. That looks cool. I like that. All right, so I've got a little bit more to work with. I'm gonna crank up the samples a little bit more again, and then yeah, maybe just do a final composite. Who knows? And there we go. I haven't saved in a while, have I? Have I? We'll see. That looks correct. Okay. So this is, you'll probably have this a little bit less when you're working with Blender if you're using the stable version. Because of the daily builds, this is what you get. You really just gotta stick with it. So, yeah. All right, questions. So we heard, I heard some big studios tend to use Blender for prototyping or rough modeling, after which they refine another software. That could be, I honestly don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I know one or two other studios that do MoGraph that use Blender and Cinema 4D together sometimes. But honestly, it really depends. I think a lot of bigger studios are just still very much entrenched in the software that they chose. So one of the reasons I still use so much is because it's incredibly pipeline friendly. And I think that's like still one of its main strengths. Add to that, the animation tools are still really good, but I think Blender is headed for a very bright future. I think the next like 5 years is going to see a lot of adoption from studios and freelancers, because honestly, it's, you know, it's free and it's awesome. So it would be weird that it doesn't get adopted a little bit more. Have you ever needed to work from converted STL models? Oh man, I can tell you all about mesh optimization. It is the worst. I haven't done it in Blender that much, unfortunately, so I don't have a lot of ready tips, but I used to do motion graphics that was very business to business. So I had like inventor models that were exported into STL. So like millions and millions and millions of polygons, and then they wanted to do some real-time stuff with it. So that was pretty crazy. Unfortunately, there's no quick fix for a bad model. You're just gonna have to go in and, depending on what you need to use it for, either retopologize it properly, just bite the bullet and just go, I'm just gonna retopologize it and not worry about it and just go for it. Or you know, depending on what you need it for, if it's just a static model, you can clean it up a little bit and you might be able to get away with it. But it's a pain in the butt. I'm not gonna lie, it really sucks going from that kind of CAD type model to something else. So. Does knowing Blender but not other 3D software, for example Cinema 4D, disadvantage you from getting a job in a firm? That's a good question. Honestly, that's a hard one to answer, because if your portfolio is really good, then they might consider you anyway. You have to be open to wanting to learn other stuff if you want to go for a studio job. I'm afraid that's just part of it. But it's hard to tell really, because for example, what can happen as well is you could be amazing at Cinema 4D and you go to work for a studio that uses 3ds Max and you have to learn 3ds Max anyway. So I don't necessarily think it puts you at a disadvantage per se, unless if you know, if you look around for job postings in your area and a lot of the studios are using Cinema 4D, then it might, you know, be useful to get into it. And that way, even though if you're stronger at Blender and you've used Cinema 4D, you can go in and tell them like, look, I've been learning Cinema 4D, I'm willing to put in the time. But honestly, a lot of the stuff that you guys could do, I could do in Blender. And if it's maybe just one other person or it's a small studio, you might even be able to convince them to switch over because, you know, because of the software costs. If you can tell them, well, you can do all of this with a free application and putting in a couple of months time, some people are definitely interested. So, but yeah, if you look at your job postings in your area and you're looking to get a job for Studio, just start learning the software the Studio uses. That will put you at more of an advantage anyway. But I don't think it's a huge disadvantage because there's still a lot of software packages out there. I mean, if you know Maya and you try to work in a studio that uses Cinema 4D, you're going to run into the same thing. So yeah. So there's a follow-up to the STL thing. I'm having some difficulty in maintaining tolerances and edge quality. Yeah, well, Fusion 360 and other sort of CAD modeling applications work completely differently. So I don't have a lot of experience with that. I've done a bit of 3D printing, but not enough to give you a good, some good advice, I'm afraid, I'll be honest. So I'm gonna dial this down a little bit to begin with. Actually, let's throw that out, because we up the exposure. All right, let's see. This is a little too glowy for my taste, so I'm gonna bring up the threshold. It's nice, it's got sort of an old school vibe to it. I'm still not convinced that the thickness of the wires is what I want, so let's see if we can change that. I have to re-render, but hey, that's the way it goes. No, F5, and save. I'm gonna get really paranoid now and try and save again. There we go, and then we'll change it to maybe half that, 0.01. There we go. We might have to up the wire intensity just a little bit because they've gotten thinner. So let's try doubling it and see what happens, and just re-render and answer a few more questions. Is the exposure in the film menu the same one as in the color management menu? I don't think so. I'm not sure, but I don't think so. I have the feeling that it works slightly differently. I'm not sure if they're linked. I don't think so. So, but don't quote me on that. Any good tutorials for mesh conversion? Followed by, retopo, no. Mesh conversion is a pain in the ass. That's just what it is. I'm afraid there's no one-click fix. It would be really cool because when you think about it, CAD is all about parametric. Oh, wrong layer. Fool! But that's looking a lot more the way I wanted it to. So there we go. Let's re-render that real quick. Are you missing some features compared to other software? For example, I really miss usable fall off in modifiers, like C4D handles it, for example. You can use the vertex weight proximity modifier to simulate something like that, and then use a vertex group to have that object fall off, or you could use dynamic paint. When I first switched over from 3ds Max and I looked at the modifiers in Blender, I was like, wow, there's way less, and I don't know if I'll be able to do the same stuff with them. But when I dug deeper, they're actually quite advanced, a lot of them, and new little features here and there are added to them all the time. So initially, I definitely did miss some stuff from 3ds Max, but I don't think there's less. They're just different. And so once you get used to that, you know, there's definitely a lot of options. Although, if I have to point out two that I might miss, one is the noise modifier, which I now replace with a displace and a texture, but it would be nice just to have a simple noise one. And the other one that I do miss, I'll admit, is the UVW map. It's so quick and max to throw on like a box UV, and I find it to be a little bit more tedious in Blender. But again, it's not the end of the world. I haven't felt like I've missed all that much. And the better you get at 3D in general, it doesn't really matter what application you're using, because a lot of it is also the way you look at things, the way you approach things. Like, I'm doing this challenge, I feel like somewhere halfway I leveled up a little bit, because I've unlocked sort of a new level of detail in some of my work. So I feel I've gotten a little bit better because of this. So yeah, don't you know, it's very easy to think that the grass is greener on the other side, especially if you go to like the Autodesk forums. Everybody's always moaning about, oh, this one's better, that one's better. Why don't we get this function or that thing? And really, it doesn't matter. Don't feel like you're missing something. Just try and figure out how to do it in the other applications, because a lot of simple basic tricks really apply to any application. So that's pretty cool. All right. So yeah, that's the issue. For example, when I started working in studios, I need to learn C4D. Yeah. So if you're going to work in a studio, then generally you'll have to adapt to them. I'm doing a job now where I'm doing visuals as well, and the person I'm working for uses Cinema 4D, and he asked me as well, so do you use Cinema 4D and Redshift? And I told him, like, well, I have Linux on most of my computers, and I'm really entrenched with Blender, and as long as the end result is good, I found that it doesn't matter. So he was actually quite interested to see how I pull some of this stuff off in Blender. So that's pretty cool. Hey Thibaut, thanks for joining in. So I loved everything you posted this year for 36 Days of Type. Thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoyed them. Hope school next year won't be as demanding, so I can participate as well. Yeah, definitely do. I want to see what you've been up to. So show me what you've got. Have you tried using Octane for Blender? I've gotten this question before. I've messed with the trial, but my main issue with it is Octane's an okay renderer. I don't, it's fine. It's good for what it is. But the thing is, I've got Cycles, which is free, and the thing with Octane is they have a special Blender build, and I know I was talking about this on the last stream. So let's actually look at it. And they sort of lag behind. So I like using daily builds a lot because I get all the new features as they're being put in, and I can test them and discuss them with other people. But let's see, demo. But Octane, they actually have to have a, let's see, they have a specially combined Blender version. And if you look at this one, let's see what version it is. Blender demo, no, that's not what I want. Blender Octane, oh yeah, so apparently they only even have a Windows build, and I didn't realize that. But as you can it's still at 2.78a, so it's actually a full version behind. And that's one of the reasons I don't like it, because suddenly I'm paying for a version of Blender that's older than the current version. That it doesn't make sense to me. And like I said, I really love Linux at the moment, and I'm going pretty ham on all the open source stuff. I didn't realize I was that into it until I got into it. So all right, let's do some final compositing and get this thing finished. Okay, so let's see what happens when we glitch the ever-living crap out of this thing and see if we can make it even cooler and crazier. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a texture down here in the world, so you can see all the textures that I've used for my modifiers, so you can even use those in the compositor. And I have no idea how this is going to work when they remove Blender internal in 2.8, but we'll see. I'll call it comp blocks, and what I'm going to do is switch this texture out with a distorted noise, set this to cell noise, and I think I've probably overused cell noise so much at this point, but it's such a useful little thing. And then input the texture, so you can load in the texture here in the compositor, which is really nice. And this is something they really need to fix, because the first one is the value for some reason, which is always just white, and the second one is the color, which is one you really want. So maybe I should file a bug report. So what are we going to do? We're going to displace, so we're going to go to distort, displace, and I'm going to distort this in the X direction because we already have, actually no, we'll see. I have to set these to 1 for it to work in the Y direction, and you're not really seeing anything happen because this is going from 0 to 1, and this is the pixel value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a math node, and all I'm going to do is just multiply these values. So if I multiply this by 50, it's going to distort 50 pixels. And now you see this really nice distortion coming in. Maybe I don't need that much, maybe just a little bit. I'm a big fan of glitching stuff out. And the other thing it does as well is it messes with your border, and I don't like that. So I'm going to fix that with a bit of a hack, but it works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a box mask, and I'll show you the steps along the way just to give you an idea what's going on. So this is the box mask, and this is the color. So this is the texture that I'm using to displace, and I'll talk about a little bit more about that one in a sec. And this is a box mask. So what I want to do is I just want the edges to be unaffected. So I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to put in a blur after this. And I set this to relative. I'm so used to working with this on relative, so it's just relative to the size of your canvas. I usually do this because when I do stills for my personal work, I'll render them small at like 1K first, and I'll size them up to about 6K and let them render overnight. And if you use the relative toggle here, it'll be relative to the canvas. So that means if you blur something out that's, you know, blurred like this on a 1K image, then am I back? Looks like it. Yeah, the stream dropped there for a second. I don't know what's going on. Let me know if there's glitches or anything. So, man, it's getting real warm in here. I'm probably looking pretty pink at this point. All right, so where are we? So the displace. Now, all I'm gonna do is if you look at this one, what I'm going to do is just mix in the actually you can just use a converter. I'm going to multiply it, and that way, what the heck's going on? I just want to show what's going on. So that way we'll have the edges around here that won't be affected by the displace. It's a little bit of a node tree, but as you'll see, it's now fixed. So if I were to mute this multiply, then you'll see the edges all messed up again. And yeah, you'll miss a little bit of displacement around the edges here, and it can look a little weird, but I'm not too bothered by it. If you would prefer it not to be as blurry, then if I turn off the blur, it's just a hard edge, which actually works quite well with this blocky type of displacement. Now I'm going to duplicate this and scale this down a little bit. And what I'm going to do is put this in the offset, and that way we get a slightly more intricate pattern. So if I bump this up, and what's going on? Why isn't that one? Okay, I'm going to flip them around. There we go, and turn this one off, and now our glitches are looking all right. So I'm just going to remove this one completely. All right, so now we're getting some glitchy stuff, and I'm glitching on the y-axis, so I'm glitching up. And what I want to do is, unfortunately, there's no quick way of doing this, so you have to get the whole thing in here. I'm going to grab all these nodes. Duplicate them over because I want a similar setup. The only thing I'm going to do here is change the offset on some of these, so it's a slightly different pattern, and then add in a second displace, distort displace, add in the y, and instead of a positive value, I'm going to put in a negative one. So if I do -30 on this one, we can get glitching that goes lower as well. Or it should go down. Let's see, is this doing anything? It's not doing anything, so I've missed something, it seems. Ah, yes, the multiply. This one goes in here. And this is a weird default as well. I have to set the vector of the glitches to 1. All right, so now we're going up and down. So this is looking really cool. Might be a little over the top. We're getting some duplication, so we're gonna tone it down just a little bit. And let's see, why is there a multiply here? That's that one, that's that one. Just gotta keep an eye on the node tree. As you can see, it gets a little overly complicated, but I could make groups, but I don't really feel like doing that right now. The only issue is that I'm getting some duplicates, so I don't know if I like that. So I might want to change the offset a little bit. There we go. Looks like there's slightly less duplication. It's all about just playing around with these parameters. There's a little bit here, which I'm not sure where that's coming. Well, I know where it's coming from, but maybe have this one at 20, and maybe have this one at minus 15. There we go. That's looking pretty nice already. So somehow we've managed to get sort of almost a vignette around it here. Let's see what else. I'm going to sharpen this up a little bit, but before I do, so I tend to use two filters after each other. So this softens down the details a little bit, and then I sharpen them up. And it gives a slightly different look than just applying the sharpen. So you can overdo this very easily. And one issue with using sharpen is that when you have edges that are very bright and very contrasty, I'm still getting some duplicates, but maybe it's part of the look. I kind of like it. There we go. But what it does is it really brings out all that detail. I don't know how visible it is in the stream. It's very easy to overdo. So I just want a little bit. There we go. That looks pretty cool. What else? What else? Let's see if we can add more streaks, and then we'll do some color correction, and I think we'll be pretty much done after that. Maybe a little bit of a vignette just to focus in on the letter a little bit more. So we'll do that first. I'm going to do that before all of this stuff and move these over. And I'll answer some more questions in a minute. Just on a roll here, I want to finish it. Clean this up a bit. So I've got that going on, so I want some streakiness. Let's see if we can get some streaks in here. Filter, glare. Bring this in. Setting the mix to 1, so I only get the glare. So if I plug this in now, you'll see I'll only get the glare parts. There we go. I'm gonna bring down the streaks, and maybe I want these vertically. Let's see. Bring the threshold up, so I only have a few of them, but they can be nice and bright, which is cool. Maybe even bring it up higher. Might work. Let's bring up the fade. I don't know how much that's going to do, but we'll see. And we're going to add these on top of everything else. That's starting to look fairly interesting. Bring the threshold down a little bit. And then I'm going to use the add to mix them in ever so slightly. So you want them to sort of accent some of the highlights, but not go too much. This is cool. And because this is separated out from the rest of the image, what you can do as well, for example, is blur these out. So I'm going to blur these out a little bit on the x-axis so they get a little bit wider, so they're not as sort of streaky. And then I can push these up again. And now they feel a little bit more natural. And you can sort of tweak this as you like it. There we go, bring some of that back. Sort of in between somewhere. Oh, and by the way, I don't know, obviously I don't have the keys on the screen anymore, but if you hold down Shift in a value slider, you actually get more control, so it goes a little bit more fine grain. So that looks awesome. I'm going to add in the vignette as well, because I definitely want to do that. So set this to multiply, and put in, I always use these mats for the vignette ellipse mask. So what this is going to do is, if I just pipe this in, I want one that's only really the sides. I don't really want to do the top too much because my letter is quite close to the edge. So I'm going to do a fair amount of, keep that in the middle, have it wide but kind of high up. So 5, come on, 0.5. There we go. So now it's in the middle. And then when we blur that out, and you can be fairly high blur, like high blur value for these. Multiply color. Oh, I already have the multiply in there. So if I throw this on and connect these up, we'll see the difference. So that's what I mean. Now there's too much going on. With this added to it, you get a nice little focus on the 9, and even though the detail is still there, it doesn't need to be like super focused. We can mess with the factor a little bit, but I honestly really like the fact that it's quite dark on the side. There we go. That's cool. Alright, we're getting there. I think I'm almost done. See if we can do one more pass of color correction. And then I think I'm going to answer some questions and call it a day. Yeah, some contrast is always nice. I like contrasty images. Like even just turning this off and on, you can see how this is nice and it looks cool. But by taking out some of the darker parts, all of a sudden the detail that you're left with is a little bit more visible. It's a bit over the top, but just contrasting it up can really help have that image pop. Maybe it's a bit too much. You know, we can always offset that balance by messing with the colors themselves. So this is really nice. I do this a lot, like almost on every image, just playing with the individual channels because it allows you to really dial in the look. So by just taking away the green a little bit, all of a sudden we get this really nice color palette that feels a lot more closer together. Even our white highlights here are turning a little bit red, more in line with everything else, which is cool. So, and then we'll see if we boost the blue, it might go too purpley. Although that's kind of cool. There we go. And this, you know, if I turn this back off, this changes the look quite drastically, but it's all about having it feel more homogeneous with those curves. So let's see. Is that it? Are they over? I think they might be. Okay, I'm going to answer some questions, and if I still feel like changing it, I will, and otherwise, that's it for today. So, let's see. So I tried using Octane, I answered that one. I heard a lot of people complaining about 3ds Max, and I personally dislike it. 3ds Max is really archaic, since that's the complaint I hear the most. Well, I used 3ds Max for 5-6 years professionally, I think. Something like that, 5 years probably. And it's a really great application that has suffered from a lot of things. So one of my main gripes with it at the moment is that every new tool they seem to put in, because I do follow it a little bit, not as much as I used to at all, but still a little bit. But a lot of the new tools that they put in, it's a completely different UI. The UI in 3ds Max is one of the things that needs a lot of work. I don't know, it's a good application. 3ds Max's modifier stack is really cool. Like Blender's one is interesting and you can do a lot of stuff with it, but 3ds Max's modifier stack is pretty intense. Like you can go pretty far with parametric and procedural stuff. And you know, they've added a lot of cool tools into it that I haven't had the chance to play with, but stuff like MCG looks really cool, but it all depends really. You know, I think it's on par with Blender with a lot of things. I think they're about at the same level. There might be a few more tools in Max, but it suffers from a lot of legacy code, and yeah, it's a bit of a shame really. And I'm already thinking of other stuff I can add, so I might add that in a little bit, but let's see. So somebody retracted a message. Octane Blender version is buggy as hell. I haven't tried it yet, so I don't know if I There is a 2.79 version, but it's in kind of a beta stage. So yeah, that's usually what you get with that kind of thing. It's too bad because I think, you know, Octane, it's definitely, it looks like it's a good render. I haven't used it that much, but I think the only render engine that could pull me away from Cycles is Redshift, but we'll see. I know they're working on integrating it into Blender, but again, we'll see. So somebody says, I've tried the glitch displacement. I can get it to work in the X direction, but not Y. That's probably the vectors. So in the displacement here, if you set these to 1, then you're activating the other vectors to be used for displacement. I don't know why these are set to 0. It's kind of weird, but whatever, it works. Blender and Houdini is a killer combo. I think it's the future for most freelancers. Blender is free and Houdini Indie is a great deal. I definitely agree with that. I haven't had the perfect job to get into Houdini, but I definitely think that Blender and Houdini is a very good combo as a freelancer. If you're able to master those two, there's very little you can't do. So for sure, I agree with that. The great thing about abstract art, if it doesn't look like it's fit, it's part of the art. Yeah, exactly. You can get away with everything because you're glitching it anyway. So somebody says, great stream, thank you very much. I love glitchy stuff, so do I. I have it running in the background while slowly working on my CGI AI project. You've been a great source of inspiration so far. Thank you very much. I'm glad I can be that. And yeah, if you're working on a CGI AI project, that sounds really cool. So definitely post that stuff once it's done. It'd be interesting to see. So you can always leave me a comment or whatever. I love, you know, looking at other people's stuff. It's always inspirational. So thanks for the stream, always useful and helps me personally for inspiration. Well, thanks for being here. It wouldn't be the same without you guys. So, you know, that goes both ways, but I do appreciate it. Any book or video recommendations for learning 3D? That's a hard one because book recommendations, I'm the wrong guy to ask because I'm a tutorial dude from the beginning, really. I don't like learning 3D from books. That's not to say it's not a good method, it's just not for me. So yeah. I don't have any recommendations specifically, but something that I still do to this day is watch beginner tutorials. And it might sound stupid, but one of the great things about beginner tutorials is that everybody has that one killer tip, like that one killer shortcut or whatever that they think new people should know because it really speeds things up. And I still learn stuff from Blender, from beginner tutorials every day because it's, you know, it's sometimes you get some of these keystrokes and some of these shortcuts that you wouldn't have figured out on your own that you're like, oh my God, this saves me like an hour every day. So just watch stuff, try stuff, and you know, the thing I can recommend is just try it. Don't be afraid of failing. Just try. Keep pushing yourself and keep going. That's probably the best thing you can do. So Redshift does look amazing. Yeah, it does. It looks cool, but I've used a lot of renderers over the years already, and they all look amazing. So, you know, I think Redshift is one that delivers on a lot of its promises, but again, Cycles is free and it is badass. So, you know, there you go. Thank you for showing your workflow. It's inspiring. Well, again, thank you for being here. All right, so I'm going to finish this off. I want maybe a couple more glitches, just single pixel glitches. So it's the same thing, basically the same technique. So I'm going to move all this stuff over, and then I'm calling it a night. So if you have any last questions, now is the time to ask them while I'm setting this up. So same deal, these guys, copy them over, connect them up, add in a displace, distort displace, there we go. And I think I want to displace on X now, just to fool around with it. So let's see. I'm gonna really crank this one up. But what I'm going to do is rather than displace these really big chunks, I'm going to scale this down like crazy. So what happens if I set this to 50? So now you get this really glitchy, small, liney stuff that's kind of fairly popular nowadays. And then what you want to do is, because you've got a lot of stuff going on here, add in a little color ramp, and then bring up the black values so you've got very little glitches, but they just add to it a little bit. There we go. And don't forget to change the offset so it's different for this one than it is for the other ones. Even though we scaled it down, it's always good to mess with these a little bit. Maybe bring up the X so they're really stretched out. Actually, that was nice the way it was. There we go. I don't want too many of them because we don't want to get completely lost in the glitch, but grab all of these again. Again, copy them over. And this is where node trees get kind of crazy. I got to figure out a good way to consolidate these to a single node because it's been getting out of hand. Put in the image, throw it in here, and throw it in there. And I'm going to do a -25 for this one so that we got some glitches running the other way. And again, scale or offset them differently. There we go. So we get a different pattern. And it might even be too much. So I'm going to tone them down just a little bit. Slightly less. Cool. I think that's it. I like these ones. Alright, well I can push these sliders like all night, so I'm just gonna call it quits. That's it, they're over. Third year in a row, that's crazy. Alright, so I'm gonna answer a few last questions and then I'm heading out. Oh, you'll share your AI project for sure, that's awesome. I think Andrew Price, aka Blender Gurus, makes some book recommendations. Also, Gleb Alexandrov. So yeah, they're good places to learn. So okay, see me again next Monday. I don't know. It depends. I'm not good at regular schedules. I'm not, like I said, I've said this before in other streams. I'm not aiming to be a YouTuber. I'm just trying to, share some stuff with people when I can. So depends. I don't have anything planned right now, but I might do more. Like I'm definitely doing more streams in the future, and hopefully some tutorials once I find some more time. So, most definitely, I really want to get into the nitty-gritty stuff. Nothing software specific, just learning how 3D behaves in general. So, what I found when I switched from 3ds Max to Blender after using Max for so long is using a different 3D application for a while really boosts your understanding of how 3D works in the background. So I would even say try messing around with some other software and see what happens. So cool. Somebody says need some good concept art Blender tutorials. I am the totally wrong guy to ask. 2D is not my jam, unfortunately. So if somebody else in the comments can help them out, that'd be great. But I don't know of a lot of concept art tutorials in Blender, unfortunately. Sorry. I wish I did, but I don't. All right, that's it. Cool. Guys, again, thank you very much for joining me. I had a blast streaming some of these, and the files will be available pretty soon. The moment I get some time to clean these up, I will, and I'll throw them online. I'll put them on the Blender cloud. So usually all of this stuff is on my website, but for the 36 days of type, I always put them on the Blender cloud. There's going to be a couple of them that you're going to have to simulate yourself to get the particles, to get them to work, but I'll try and find a way to make that clear in the file itself. So, all right, thanks all for being here, and yeah, I'll see you next time.